In a remote village tucked behind dusty hills, lived a little girl with no mother and no father. Her name was Fatima, but few ever called her that. Most simply referred to her as the cursed orphan, or the girl with no name. She had lost both parents to a deadly fever when she was only 3, leaving her in the care of a bitter aunt who saw her as nothing more than a burden. Fatima grew up in silence. Each day began with chores, fetching water, washing clothes, helping sell vegetables in the market, and ended with tears on a thin straw mat under a leaking roof. School was no sanctuary either. Children would mock her tattered clothes and hollow eyes. "Don't touch her, or you'll catch her misery," they'd whisper, some even aloud. Still, Fatima never answered with anger. Despite the cruelty, she clung to something unseen: faith. Late at night, while her aunt snored, Fatima would whisper prayers into the darkness, asking Allah to give her strength. She didn't ask for wealth or beauty or even love. "Just let me survive, Ya Allah," she would say, eyes glistening with tears. "Help me hold on." She had no toys, no friends, and no dreams, only a Quran with torn pages gifted by a kind old ustad who had once visited her school. That Quran became her treasure. Each verse, though difficult for her to read at first, felt like a balm for her broken soul. It was through those verses she began to believe that even an unwanted child could be loved by Allah. To the world, Fatima was nothing, but in her tiny heart, she believed she was something. Not because anyone told her so, but because Allah had created her. That belief, fragile as it was, became the seed of a future no one could predict. Life with her aunt grew harsher as Fatima got older. Any mistake, dropping a cup, coming home late, coughing too loudly, would result in shouts, curses, and sometimes slaps. Her aunt would scream, "You should have died with your parents." Those words stuck like knives, but Fatima said nothing. She simply cleaned the broken cup, bowed her head, and kept going. At school, things were no better. She was often left alone, assigned the dirtiest jobs during group projects, and sometimes her food would mysteriously disappear. One day, a boy tripped her in the hallway, causing her to fall and scrape her hands. As the children laughed, Fatima looked up at the sky and whispered, "Ya Allah, you see me, don't you?" Her teachers noticed her silence but were too burdened by their own struggles to intervene. Yet there was one, a quiet substitute named Miss Hanifa, who once slipped a small note into Fatima's math book. It read, "Allah tests the ones He loves most. Stay strong." That note became a lifeline. Fatima kept it folded inside her Quran. She began waking up earlier than usual, sneaking into the mosque at dawn before school. There, in the quiet warmth of the prayer hall, she would read the Quran and sit in stillness. No one mocked her there. No one hit her. Only the echoes of her recitations filled the space like a small girl calling out to the heavens. Every bruise made her body ache, but every verse made her heart stronger. The pain didn't disappear, but it became bearable. She still had nothing, no one. But slowly her soul began to whisper, "Maybe, one day, this will all make sense." One rainy morning, Fatima found a poster pasted on the mosque's gate. It announced a Quran recitation competition for orphans, organized by a charity from the city. The grand prize was a scholarship to a prestigious Islamic boarding school. Her hands trembled as she read it. Could she even dream of such a thing? The next day, she asked her aunt if she could join. Her aunt scoffed. "You? They're looking for smart kids, not dirt like you." But she didn't say no, so Fatima took it as a yes. With trembling courage, she registered at the nearby madrasa that was handling the sign-ups. She had never felt so afraid, and yet so alive. Days turned into nights of preparation. She studied harder than ever, practicing tajweed, memorizing surahs, and listening to recitation recordings in secret. Her clothes were still torn. Her life was still hard. But for the first time, she had a goal, and in that goal, she found fire. The competition day came. Fatima walked alone to the venue, clutching her Quran tightly. Her name was called. She stepped forward, The audience was full of clean, well-dressed children with shiny shoes and proud caretakers. But when she began to recite, a silence fell. Her voice, though small, was pure. Every letter, every pause carried the weight of her journey. When she finished, a few in the audience were wiping their eyes. A judge leaned into the mic and simply said, "Subhanallah." Fatima didn't win first place that day, but she won something greater. A scholarship offer from a woman in the audience who ran a boarding school. "I want that child," she said. "I want to help her rise." Boarding school life was like entering another world. Fatima received clean clothes, a warm bed, and most of all, respect. No one mocked her. Teachers encouraged her. Students listened when she spoke. It was overwhelming at first. For a girl used to shadows, the light felt too bright. But slowly, she adjusted. She caught up in her studies with astonishing speed. Her Quran memorization deepened. She became known for her kindness, always helping younger students, often giving away her extra food without hesitation. "I know what hunger feels like," she once told a friend. "I never want anyone else to feel that way." In her second year, she entered another Quran competition, this time as the school's official representative. She placed second at the national level. Her story began to spread. Articles were written. A local TV show featured her in a Ramadan segment called "Light from the Shadows." People were amazed by her eloquence, her calm strength, and her gratitude. When asked how she had survived such a painful past, Fatima answered, "Because Allah never left me. Even when people did, He stayed." Her faith, which had once been her only companion in darkness, now became her greatest light. She was no longer the cursed orphan. She was Fatima, the girl who rose. Her aunt saw her on TV one day and wept silently, not out of regret, but out of something new, shame, and maybe a little pride. "That girl," she whispered, "was stronger than I ever knew." Years passed. Fatima graduated with honors and earned a scholarship to study Islamic education at a university in Jakarta. She was now 18, confident, and deeply committed to helping others like her. She began volunteering at orphanages on weekends, sharing her story and encouraging children to never lose hope. She started a small foundation called Yatim Cahaya, meaning Orphans of Light. Its mission was simple: to give forgotten children the tools to believe again. She used her own savings, gathered donations, and reached out to networks she'd built during her competitions and studies. The foundation grew, slowly, steadily, like a flower finally finding sun. Fatima also continued studying the Quran and eventually became a certified Hafidha. Her voice became known not just for its beauty, but for the emotion behind every verse. In interviews, she often quoted her favorite line from Surah Al-Baqarah: "Allah does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear." It had carried her for years. She still remembered the nights on the straw mat, the bruises, the hunger. But she no longer hated them. "Those nights built me," she would say. "Without them, I wouldn't have found Allah like I did." Pain had become her teacher. Faith had become her home. And now she was a guide for others, showing them that even a broken beginning could bloom into something extraordinary, if Allah willed it. Chapter 6. Return to the village. One day, Fatima received an invitation to speak at her old school. She hadn't returned to the village in over 10 years. With a heart full of mixed feelings, she accepted. When she arrived, children gathered, whispering, "That's her, the one from TV." Even her old bullies were there, now grown, watching with awe and a strange guilt in their eyes. Fatima gave a talk about resilience and tawakkul. She shared how every verse of the Quran had stitched her soul together when the world tried to tear it apart. Her voice didn't tremble. Her message was clear. Your worth isn't decided by people. It's written by Allah. Fatima walked through the same paths she had once run barefoot. The same mosque, the same leaky house. But nothing felt the same. Now, she saw it all as a chapter. Painful, yes, but necessary. Even broken soil can grow beautiful things, she whispered to herself. She left the village not with bitterness, but with peace. The past had not been erased, but it had been redeemed. Today, Fatima is known across the country as an educator, a hafida, and a changemaker. Her foundation now supports hundreds of orphans. She often says, "I was once a forgotten flower, but Allah saw me. He watered me with tears and faith until I bloomed." She never married by choice, not because no one wanted her, but because she felt her heart belonged fully to the mission Allah gave her. "I am married to this cause," she once joked in a speech, smiling through tears. Her life had become a living tafsir of patience and purpose. Whenever she's asked how she forgave everyone who hurt her, she replies, "Because if I didn't forgive, their chains would still hold me. I chose freedom for myself and for them." That forgiveness became the key to her lasting joy. Children now write her letters. Girls call her their hero. Parents name their daughters Fatima, and yet she remains humble. "I'm not special," she insists. "I'm just someone who refused to stop believing when there was nothing to believe in except Allah." And thus the orphaned flower bloomed. Not in a garden, not in luxury, but in fire. And by Allah's grace, she became a light that will guide many in darkness for years to come.